This is Dan Abbott. I'm making this video for my CAD applications class or for my CAD graphics class, and I'm going to show you how you might make your own title block. What you need first is to determine what size paper you're planning on, and you'll make a title block for each sheet size you plan to use. It's actually easier than it sounds, because most of the time in a mechanical title block you can actually make a title block and put it in different size borders for the different sheets. This example is going to be an imperial title block, but you can then use it for metric as long as you modify any references to inches by just increasing the size of the title block by 25.4. So first we have to make sure that whatever we draw is going to fit into the sheet size that we are going to use, and since the sheet size is determined by the plotter and the printable area on a specific sheet is also determined by that plotter, first we're going to go look at a plotter and make sure we have an idea what dimensions a border can be, and then start from there. So we're going to go start a drawing. Because I'm doing an imperial title block, I'm going to start that drawing with the AutoCAD DWT. I'm going to draw this title block in model space, and it's not going to be turned into a block in this drawing. It's simply going to be a drawing of a title block. It's going to contain lines, it's going to contain text, and it's going to contain attributes. But I'm not going to turn it into a block. I'm simply going to save it after drawing it in model space, and then I can insert that drawing into any other drawing I want, and it will become a block in the drawing I inserted in. So let's take a look at an existing title block, just so you get an idea what I'm talking about. This is a title block that's drawn in model space. You'll notice down here the model space tab is current. When you insert a drawing into another drawing, you only get elements from model space. So this title block has to be in model space if you want to use it in other drawings. And if you take a look, if I were to select it, it's not one item. It's all individual lines. It's also individual attributes. We'll take a look at those in just a minute. And it has some other text in it as well. Those text entities are just text entities and not attributes. I've even got a little block here, which is a school logo. So let's go back to figuring out what size we need. I'm going to draw a title block in here, and I'll just use the other one as a reference. I'm going to go to a layout, and in a layout I'm going to right click, go to Page Setup Manager, and in Page Setup Manager I'm going to modify it, and what I'm trying to determine is how much room do I actually have on a sheet of paper for this title block. We're not really doing a page setup here, so I don't need to worry about the plot style table. It would be monochrome if I did. When you open this up, it'll give you a list of all the plotters available to you. They're either real plotters, physical things with paper in it, or they're virtual plotters, which means you're going to create a file of some kind when you plot. What you'll find listed here is all the plotters that are available to you in whatever office you work in via the network or directly connected to your computer. You'll also find all your system printers there. I'm in my home office because of the COVID, and so in my home office I don't have a full-size plotter. What I have is a LaserJet printer. That LaserJet printer is only capable of printing up to A-size paper. So I'm not going to set up a title block for that. Instead I'm going to come down and use DWG to PDF so I can actually set it up on a B-size sheet of paper. Then I need to go and select the paper that I'm using. When you're using a PDF plotter, you have three choices. One is full bleed, one is expanded, and one is standard. Standard is extremely conservative. Full bleed is extremely liberal in terms of how much space you have. So what I'm going to do is go and find ANSI, stands for American National Standards Institute, and that is the mechanical series of paper. The mechanical series and the architectural series differ, in that the mechanical series starts with a size for A sizes 11 by 8.5. The architectural series starts with an A-size sheet that's 12 by 9, and they all increase in size from there. So I'm going to go to the ANSI B, and I want ANSI B expanded. So if I find ANSI expanded B 17 by 11, everything else is fine. I pick OK, and I get a fairly large sheet of paper. Now that's a viewport. I'm just going to get rid of that for now. What I want is to make sure that my title block fits on this size sheet of paper. So if I look in the lower left-hand corner, that's the 0, 0 point, and the 0, 0 point is the lower left-hand corner of the printable area, not the sheet itself. Now the printable area in this goes a little close to the border, so I'm going to look at that and think, I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle. I'm just going to go in about 1/4 of an inch, 0.250 to start it. And then I'm going to go, and just by eye, I'm going to put a rectangle in that I know is inside that printable area. Now that means when I start my title block, I want to start the corner of the title block at 0.25, 0, so that when I bring it in, I can just drop it in place as an inserted block without having to identify where it goes. So that's going to give me about a ½ inch here. It looks like about a ½ inch here. And then up here, I think that's a little bit too close for the visually, so I'm going to bring that in as well. So that's about a ½ inch as well. I think that looks good. So that's what I want. So now I'm just going to put a dimension on here. Say how big is it from here to here, and how big is it from here to here. So you'll notice I've got 16 and a little more, and I've got 10 and about 1/8 of an inch more. I do want about a ½ inch border, so I'm going to call that 16 by 10. So what I know right now is that the origin of my title block, I want to make 0.25, 0, and that the size is going to be 16 by 10 inches. So now I'm going to go back, and nothing I do here is going to be affecting the insertable title block. I'm going to go back to model space. I'm going to draw a rectangle here that starts at 0.25, 0 and goes at 16, 10, and there's the border that I can use for my title block. Now, rather than recreate an entire title block on this video, I'm just going to go back over to the one I brought in as an example. I'm going to show you that this has a border, goes all the way around. That's a rectangle as well, but it also has the title block itself, which should be in the lower right-hand corner. Many title blocks are a little box here than this. They come up higher. But when I'm using mechanical drawings, especially for A size and B size, I want a relatively low profile title block. So I don't want a title block that kind of comes up here like that. So this is really what I would want. And if I were to put some dimensions on here, we'll do a Q dim, and I'll just show you where I'm just picking all these lines here, my Q dim. Just show you the sizes that I use going up and down on this. So I'll do that with ordinate dimensions, and I'll start my datum point right there, bring those out like that. So the way I designed this is it's 3/10 of an inch to that first line, 5/10 of an inch to the next one, an inch up to here, 1.3 inches to here. So the entire title block in this case is 1.3 inches tall. The vertical lines are going to depend on what kind of information you want to put there. So let's take a look at what should be in a title block. At a minimum, you need a title. I have a title here, and this is an attribute, and I'll show you in a second what that means. You also need the date that the drawing was submitted, the scale that the drawing was drawn at. Drawing number is a way of keeping track. It's a tracking mechanism for drawing. And that drawing number is normally the same size as the title. And you'll notice all the text in here except the title and the drawing number are going to be, in this case, 0.1, anywhere from 0.1 to 0.12 inches. And the title and the drawing number are going to be 0.2 or 0.24. So the title and the drawing number should be twice the height of all the other text. For this purpose, you also need a page of, which means if you've got 6 sheets in a drawing and you're on page 3 of 10 sheets, you want to have a 3 in this location and a 10 in this location. We'll see what those things are in just a minute. Because we're in a course here, the instructor name and course are here. That wouldn't normally be in a standard title block. However, in a standard title block, you do want to know who drew it. That would normally be placed with your first initial and last name, and that's another attribute. Who checked the drawing? That's normally done by somebody else who's also a drafter or designer in an office. Often the designer of whatever product you're drawing, and then the person who checked that design might show up as well. The name of the company, in this case it's Southern Maine Community College. In your case, why don't you make up a company name for whatever you want to use. The address of the company, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a phone number in there, so there's a contact. You might have an email address in there, or even a website. For mechanical parts, you have to indicate what the projection system is. We use the third angle projection system in the United States. Many other countries use first angle projection. There's quite a difference. And in fact, particularly if you're doing like sheet metal work, it can be very easy for someone to overlook the fact that the projection system is identified here, interpret the drawing incorrectly, and end up folding everything backwards. The correct symbol for third angle projection is a front view that's two circles representing the end of a truncated cone, and then it has a right side view of the truncated cone. If that symbol, that one right there, was simply moved to the left, it would be first angle projection. I also think it's a good idea to actually identify it with third angle projection in case people misread that symbol. Little icon if you want, some kind of logo, whatever you want there. I also have tags on mine, and I think that's a good idea, rather than just having data in there so that the kind of data is identified. For mechanical part, you have a standard normally that drawing is being interpreted by. So for the United States, the geometric dimensioning of this would be interpreted per, and that is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers Y14.5 M-2009. Now there is a new standard 2018, and I have reviewed that standard, but most companies right now are still using the 2009 standard, and that's why I left it in here. If you're actually using the newer standard, then you would want to change that. And if we're going to change that, it would look like this. And by the way, they dropped the M, which stands for metric, because now everybody knows it's metric. You don't have to tell us anymore. Very common for mechanical part to have a location for material. Since the material is specified, especially in a section drawing, by a hatch pattern or a particular pattern that goes into a section view, that hatch pattern material is just very generic, steel. Well, there's thousands of kinds of steel, so the material can be specified here, so it's more specific. Mechanical drawings, but no other kind of drawing, require that you have tolerances identified in the title block. In the United States, we're allowed to do something that most other countries don't permit. When I say most other countries, I mean the standard used by most other countries is the ISO, the International Standards Organization standard. We use the ASME standard. In this country, we frequently use precision as a way of carrying tolerance significance. So if there's a whole number with no decimal places, you can assume the precision is plus or minus a tenth of an inch. You have one decimal place plus or minus 30 thousandths of an inch, or about a 32nd. Two decimal places plus or minus 10 thou, and then three decimal places plus or minus 5. Now that varies depending on the office or the shop. When I was working in a shop, our general tolerance was plus or minus 3 thou if there were 3 decimal places. You'll never see 4 decimal places, because when you get out there, you're talking about specific classes of fit, and those are going to vary specifically with the size of the feature that you're dimensioning. So those kinds of tolerances will be placed directly on the part with a dimension that has two numbers, an upper number and a lower number. It would never be a plus or minus tolerance for a class of fit. That wouldn't work. Fractions aren't supposed to be used on prints, at least not to carry significance for manufacturing, but they sometimes still are. This might just be a holdover for me because of my age, but when I started working in machine shops, we did use fractions, and a 32nd of an inch was the standard plus or minus tolerance, if not indicated otherwise. Angles are generally a half a degree. So those are the kinds of things that would be in a mechanical title block. And again, these dimensions are simply the dimensions I used. Frequently, title blocks, if you look at title blocks provided by SolidWorks, for instance, they're this great big, more rectangular and less, a much higher profile title block. Personally, I think that gets in the way. As far as text goes, Roman S is what I use in AutoCAD for the text itself. I used Calibri, or Calibri, I don't know how to pronounce it, for the little tags, just because it makes them a little bit darker and they're smaller. They make the tags themselves a little bit smaller. In fact, let's take a look at that. If you look at that right there, the height of that is 0.08. It's not very large, but it's just a tag showing you what data goes in there. If you look at this, the height of that isn't given when I do that, but if I look at quick properties, the height of that is 0.2. So 0.2 inches for the title. Everything else, if I look at it, let me grab that as well. Everything else, if I look at it, the height is 0.1, right there. And I use a style called Roman S. Take a look at that too. If I look in here, the style I have here, I've got several styles. One is called Calibri, which is what I use for the tags. The other is called Roman S, which is what I use for all the other text in the title block. And then I also have SMCC, which is a Times New Roman font. And the reason I have SMCC as the Times New Roman is because that looks more like our school sort of standard font. Doesn't look exactly like it, but it's pretty darn close. So you pick your text styles based on what you want your text to look like. You don't need a whole lot of them here. Here's a case where I actually would get rid of that one right there. And this is simply the fonts used for the title block. That's all I care about here. And so none of these are going to be annotated because your title block is never annotated. Title block comes in, it goes into paper space, period. You insert it in paper space from a drawing where it's drawn in model space. Take a look at attributes. This is not a piece of text, it's actually an attribute. If you hover over it, it tells you it's an attribute definition. Attribute definitions are created using the @def command. ATT is the alias. You bring it up, it allows you to create an attribute. And the attribute in this case is going to have a tag and it's going to have a prompt. So let's just say we haven't created attributes yet for date. I always do uppercase on these because all the text in a drawing title block must be uppercase. So the tag is going to be date. Prompt is simply what it asks you when you go and insert that block. So I always have my prompt simply be whatever the tag is with a question mark after it. Default is only if that's something that is normally the case. And normally the case doesn't apply to dates because it changes every time you submit a drawing. Then you indicate whether you want it justified left or middle. Actually, I use middle when I have the title so it fits right in the center of that window, and I'll show you that in a second. And I use left justified for everything else. The height can be given here. You select the type of font that you're going to use, or the type, the text style and the font that it's based on. And when you pick OK, you just put it someplace. Now I've already got this in here. It's right there. So if I hadn't already placed that here, I could put it in. Now as far as making additional attributes, what I always do is this. Most of the attributes in my title block are going to be the same text type. So I simply make one attribute that has all the characteristics I want, and then I copy it as many times as I need to, double click on it, and then change the tag. In this case I'll say scale, change the prompt, scale question mark, and because most of the time my scale is likely to be 1:1, I'm going to add a default here. I also misspelled the word scale. Well, it was a typo. I actually know how to spell scale. Right now, just to show you what happens, again, this is a drawing with attribute definitions, but it's not a block. Now, if I were to save this drawing, I'm going to go over here and just do a save as. And I'm going to save it, and I'm going to put it in my documents folder, and I'll call it, it's actually got a name, DA Mech Inch. I'm going to save this thing in my documents folder. If I start a brand new drawing now, and in that drawing I go over here to layout, and I set up a layout for myself, where I've got page setup manager, I go to modify, I pick a plotter of some kind, I come down here and I pick a B-size sheet of paper. I'm just going to grab any old B-size sheet of paper, the first one that I see. Here we go. And I put the sheet of paper in. And now, if I go to insert, and this is the new, insert palette over here. If I go to insert, and I say I want to go and look for, under documents, I'm going to look for that file that I just saved. DA metric mechanical is right here. Or was it DA inch? I don't remember what I called it now. 27. DA mech inch. It's that one right there. So if I go ahead and bring this in now, and bring it onto my tool palette, I go back over to blocks, and I say I want to bring that in, and I'm going to make the insertion point something that I put on. I'm going to make it something that I put on the sheet. I'm going to go 0, 0. When I go 0, 0, it comes in with all the spacing that I want. And you'll notice this comes in so that it's just inside of the printable area. I've got my sizes in here. Now that it came in, you'll notice that it created a number of things with my name in them already. And up here it's got the 1:1. Those are the two attributes that I just added. Those attributes are already in the drawing, and I see I've got to make a change in one of them right there. What happens is they come in now, the value is placed in there because this is now a single block. This is not a bunch of individual things. Double click on this and I can change the value of those. So if I've got scale and date in here twice. I'm going to get an error for that, and the reason is to demonstrate how to make attributes. I use the same tags, date, and scale, for these two. So I put them in there, but it said there's an error. You've got a duplicate name here, and you shouldn't do that. But that's how the attribute is going to work once you insert the block into another drawing. I'm going to throw this one away because I don't want it. I'm going to go back over here to the one that I was working on, and I'm going to just get rid of those things right there. I'm going to save it again, and now I'm not going to use this as my title block, because don't forget, when we started, I went and found the size, and I do a border over here. What I am going to do is this. I'm going to go, I'm going to go, and I'm just going to borrow this one. Again, I want you to create your own, but I'm going to borrow this one. I don't really need the dimensions anymore. You see what those would be. I'm going to borrow that by just copying it. And I'm going to copy it by going to Edit, Copy with Base Point, and I'm going to pick as my base point that corner right there. Now I'm going to go back over to this drawing, and I'm going to go up to Edit. I'm going to say Paste It, but not as a block. I don't want it to turn into a block. I'm just going to paste it, bring it down here, and do that. It opens up and it asks me for those things, and I'm just going to pick OK, because even though it asked me those questions, all I did was copied and pasted, but not as a block. So this is exactly what I had in the other drawing, which is lines, text, and attributes. I will point out here, this sometimes confuses people. It looks like that's going to be overlapping. It isn't, because the only thing I'm going to put in there is numbers. In fact, I probably shouldn't have deleted that other one. Let's go try to do this one more time. I'm just going to bring that in as a block. So if I bring that in as a block right now, and it looks like this, and it comes in, you notice it, excuse me, you notice all the things that are filled in. But if I double click on this, and it opens up the attribute tag, which is not opening up for some reason. Normally does, not sure why it didn't. So I'm going to add edit, and add edit allows me to pick the block reference, and then it should open up, which it does. So if I look at this list here, if I had said this is page 1 of 10 and put it in here and called this AEDD 105 and left everything else the same, now the 1 of 10 shows up as sheet sizes, and I put those in so that they were located so that the number was kind of centered right there. A little line that sticks up, sorry. And then the 10 comes over here. So, you know, the attribute tag, in other words, could be really long and not actually be a problem because the value you assigned is short enough to fit into the box. Unless I have a 3-digit number, which would be extremely unusual for a set of drawings, I'm not going to have any trouble fitting that in. All right, so let me throw this away again so it doesn't confuse us. So now that's the drawing that I borrowed from. I'm just going to close out of that one as well, because I'm going to go back over here, because this is the one I'm creating. This is the one where I found out what the border size would be that would fit on that sheet, and I went from there. Now what I want to do here is just show you the difference between, we'll do it on this one. I'm going to show you the difference between the justifying left and justifying right. If I eliminated that and I went into @def, and I'm going to make a new attribute called title question mark, and of course the title is going to change too. I'm going to make the height 0.2. I don't want the text style to be standard, I want it to be Romanesque. And what I'm going to do here under justify is I want to do middle justify on that. Well, what middle justify means, it's going to come in with the middle part of your text as the insertion point. So if the middle part of my text is the insertion point, what I'm going to do to pick the insertion point is to go Shift, right click, midway between 2 points, and I'm going to go midway between the diagonals there, and it drops it right in the center. Now let's talk about layers. And I did the same thing down here, by the way. I didn't actually go diagonals. If you take a look, the midpoint is here. It's just kind of centrally located. The midpoint is here. It's also centrally located, and did that by eye. No problem spending a lot of time on your title block and doing things by eye so it looks right, because once you've got it, you can use it over and over again. Now let's talk about layers. The layers that I want to use for my title block is going to be a border layer for the outside border. Def points is simply there because I put some dimensions on here. I have a logo layer so I can turn the logo on and off. Logos are frequently raster-based images that are just put in as OLE objects, and so sometimes it's nice to be able to turn them off. And then I have a T block for the text that has little tags, and TB text for the attributes that I'm putting in, and they have different colors. And the border, you'll notice, is 0.4. So I'm going to take that rectangle right there, and this line right here, and that line right there, and this line, and this line. I'm going to put all of those lines on the border layer. Now, some of them are already on the border layer, but so I'm just going to grab all of them because I want those to be heavier lines, and I want them to be as heavy as the object lines in the drawing. So I'm going to say let's drop those on the border layer. Now if I turn my line weights on, you'll notice that I've got a border with nice thick line weights. Also got a pretty good sized border on this one because that's the way it's made. That is a little block, by the way, of the school logo, and so I've outlined that as well. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to put this on the same layer as that. So I showed you a little trick about not bothering to go through the @def process for every single attribute. Make one and then copy it and use that as a starting point for the others. There's another tool I use all the time. I know I want that to match this. I don't feel like figuring out what layer it's on because I've forgotten. All I have to do is go up to the Match Properties button, which I use all the time, and say match the properties of that, match the properties of that to this. The reason I had to switch is because the text height property for this is the same as the one I want there. Whereas if I'd said match the properties of this to that, you see it would have made the text smaller. Because it's not just the layer. All the properties that can be matched are matched when you do that. Okay, now, so all these other things are just attributes, just the way I showed you that other attribute right there, including material. So now that I've got this and I'm in model space, I'll reinforce that. This drawing is in model space because I want to use it as a block to insert it into other drawings. Now I'm going to do a save as, and I'll put it someplace, and I'll call this title block exercise, and I'll put it in my documents folder. So that's what it's going to be called. And now we're going to close it. Now I'm going to start a new drawing. When I start the new drawing, it's going to be an imperial drawing. I'm going to go over to my layout, and I'm going to say I want B size for this. And by the way, I'd have a template set up already with this if I were working on drawings in a shop. I'm going to go to Page Setup Manager, Modify. I'm going to go back down and pick that sheet size that I designed this for. Sheet size I designed it for is ANSI Expanded B. Come back out like this. Now I can use the palette over here, but the one I have on that palette right now is the other title block, not the one I just saved. There is another command in AutoCAD that you can get to with DD Insert or Insert Classic. And there is a Classic Insert. It is Classic Insert that brings up that dialog box. I personally like it better. So what I'm going to say is don't bother to specify on the screen because I made this so it drops in place. I go to Documents and then find that title block exercise and bring it in. I clear those out because now I do that and automatically goes in the right place and it asks me these questions. So, I can put whatever information I want in here as it comes in, or I can do it later on. Let's say this is page 2 of 4. I can put that information in here. The title, test, title block, drawing, whatever you want to call it. When you're done and pick OK, it's like magic. It just shows up in the right place. And if you notice, it has a border all the way around. It's got it's no question that it's inside the printable area. If I do a preview on this, the entire thing shows up. And now I can just modify my viewport so that it fills just the area that's available to me. Although I can tell you that there's another little spot down here that doesn't get used, And that's okay, because what I normally do there is put a revision table for something like this. But you could make a viewport. Right now my viewport's rectangular. I could make a viewport if I go to the Layout tab. And the Layout tab up here, if you take a look, is that one. If I go to the Layout tab and I say I want to do a polygonal layout, I can say do a viewport that completely fills the area that you could draw. So now if you're in model space, you can draw things that come down into here, over here, over here, but none of them, no matter what, it's not going to cover up your title block. So now I've got as much area that I could possibly want to draw as possible. And let's just kind of wrap this up quickly and say, well, okay, great. What if now what I wanted to do was create one for A size paper or C size paper? And what I would do is just go into model space and make a new title block there. And let's just say that I've figured out the size of A size sheet of paper, and A size sheet of paper is 8.5 by 11. So let's say I go over 10 by 7.5, and that's the border that I want. Now what I would do is just insert that title block that I just brought in, and the one that's over on documents called title block exercise. I'd bring this in, and I'd actually put it someplace, but I'd explode it when it came in and just kind of stick it there. And now I can just copy, or even just move, since that's all I want. Move all those things from here to here. And when I do, all I have to do is make sure it doesn't quite fit in there because of the size, because of the way I did that paper. I actually think I'd get a larger border. Let's go find out. So if I go to Layout, let's make sure it's going to fit into A size sheet of paper. I go to Layout, go to Page Setup Manager, I'm going to modify. Once again, I'll pick the DWG to PDF. This time I'm going to go get ANSI, not full bleed though. Full bleed is just gives you too much space. Expanded. See what that is, and then close that. And now what I want to know is, how much space do I have to put in here? So I'll draw another rectangle at 0.25, 0. And I'll bring it all the way up to there. And I'll do a linear dimension to see how much room I have here, because that's the thing, 10.3. So let's go back out to the model. And what I'm going to do is see if I add 0.3 to that border, is that going to work for me or not? So in other words, let's move this. Just kind of put it off to one side for now. So if I make the border here by stretching it, I add 0.3 to it that way. Is that going to be enough for my title block to fit in there? And if it is, I'm good to go. What I'm doing now is just tracking down to that point, so I can bring that back over here. And look at that. So obviously what I want to do here, because that sticks out just a little bit, is I get rid of that, and then I would go and do the trim command, and I'd say get rid of those little pieces right there. So the point is that I'm using the same title block and just putting it on a different border. And now all I have to do is say put that on the border layer. And now if I put my line weights on, you can see I've got another title block here. Get rid of any extraneous stuff that I don't want in here. Do a zoom extents to make sure there's nothing out in the background. Now this is my A size title block. So I need to clarify that on the title block exercise. This title block is title block exercise A size. And that other one would be B size. Now let's just say, let's take this one right here. Let's say I want to now make this something I can use for metric. All I have to do, since I'm going to use it on the same size sheet of paper, I'm going to scale everything from 0, 0 up 25.4. Now what I have to do now is go in and say, this is not inches, instead it's millimeters. So I'll change that. Oops, uppercase. Get that out of the way. Unless otherwise noted. Then tolerances unless otherwise noted. All the fraction would stay in there. That's fraction. The angle would stay in there. The fraction would be gone. And all you'd have to put here is tolerance, unless otherwise noticed, would be plus or minus. And in AutoCAD, I can do that with percent P. Oh, gotta do the height. 0.1 angle. All right, percent P is the plus or minus symbol. 0.0, probably 1/100th of a millimeter. So that is going to be, oh, but I am in a metric drawing here. And because I'm in a metric drawing, I need to change. I don't have to actually change much else, but I need to make the height of that not 0.1. I need to make the height of that 3. So let's change that because this is millimeters now. We go to quick properties, change that to 3, actually 2.5. Come back out, and now that's got to have, that looks right, and I'll just put that on the same layer as this. In fact, I probably just could have put it at the end of that, would have made more sense. So I've got a little bit of room here. I might want to use that for something else, but there's nothing else in this title block that is non-metric. So at this point, I can do a save as, and I'll save this one and call it title block exercise A size metric. I probably wouldn't make such long names if I were really doing this, but just to make a point here. So that'd be now metric size. And you can do the same thing for other size sheets of paper. Make a C size sheet and bring the same thing in. And make anything you want metric by multiplying by 25.4. It's a fairly long video now, so I'm going to stop it and then let you know where to find it.